So you're gonna be our tourist guide?
Yes, I will.
Cool. And what is your name?
My name is João. J-O-A-O. We are arriving now at the monastery. This is actually a building from the 1500s.
Oh wow.
And what happens here is that on the left part, this lower part, this was actually the monastery of the Jerónimos order, the order responsible to maintain this. And nowadays you have, it is divided inside, and this part is the Museum of Navy. In here you have an archaeological museum, and then you have the monastery museum, where you can go and see rooms and see architecture and everything. Where I'm going to take you is to this one, and this one is the church. So now I'm going to take you here to the pastry factory.
Oh, so where's the original one?
Yeah, the original. These ones were actually developed, invented by the monks that were here in the monastery. So the recipe and the factory is from 1837.
Wow. And the one that we bought was 1892?
Yeah.
Was a century older. Ito na yung original.
For the similarity is a lot of people think it's a copycat. But actually it's not. It's like a design follows function, and it's basically because both San Francisco and Lisbon are very seismic, are in a very seismic area. So if an earthquake happens, this is the design that can better withstand the seismic waves. And also the color, it's the best color for airplanes to see it in a fog situation. In the 1980s, we added a train that passes underneath. So you have the upper deck is for cars, and the bottom deck is for the train.
Amazing. San Francisco doesn't have that.
Building, this huge building, used to be called the Mercado da Ribeira, like the riverfront market, and used to be like a fresh produce market, like fish, meats, vegetables, and everything that supplied the southern part of Lisbon on the 18th century, 19th century. But then when like grocery stores appeared and supermarkets and everything, there was not enough demand for a place like this. Everyone bought the produces from the street, right? And so it was kind of abandoned, and the city hall actually decided to go around here and ask all the famous chefs around here, like chefs with Michelin stars and everything, if they wanted to make a food court with smaller versions of their restaurants at affordable prices. So, and they accepted. Flying earthquake in recorded history was a 9.0 in Richter scale.
Wow.
So it completely destroyed the city. And since it happened in the ocean, it was followed by a 20-meter tsunami. So all of the part that is the downtown area, obviously since it's at sea level, at water level, it was completely flushed by the tsunami. And all of this area had to be demolished and reconstructed. So all the buildings that we are going to pass, and the reason for like the similar architecture, if you see, everything is very similar here. And the reason for that is that it had to be, the 18th century had to be completely rebuilt, and they had to install, it was the first time that they installed like urban codes. So before that you just could build whatever you want, but after the earthquake, that's the reason for the balconies to being so small, is that if you can stay in the middle of the street and no debris fall on your head in case of an earthquake. And they had to develop also architectural engineering ways for the buildings to be seismic proof. This is the city hall over here. City Hall of Lisbon. Just entered the hill of the historical center. And the reason for this is that you know that Lisbon is the city of 7 hills. So you have many hills over here, 7 as they say. Actually it's 6. 7. And this one is actually, this hill where the historical center is, was only one of the few places that survived the earthquake, and basically because of the geology of the hill.
It's high.
It was like the geology allowed the seismic waves to not be so destructive here. St. George Castle is actually behind these buildings over here.
Okay.
So you have the hill. You're going to understand this better, but since we are climbing now, you can't see the castle from here. So in 1147, the Portuguese people actually arrived at Lisbon, and they obviously conquered the castle first, right? That was a defensive place. But right after the castle, they came down and they conquered the big mosque that was here. Because at the time, it was the Arabs, the people from North Africa, that were living here and occupying Lisbon. And what happened here is that they demolished the mosque and they built this huge cathedral. So this cathedral is called the cathedral, the Church of Santa Maria Maior. That's the name of this neighborhood, but we call it the Cathedral SE. It's like a C.
It's like,
SE. And what happens here is that you can see that this is a very Gothic church. It's basically a defense. It's a fortress, right?
Yeah,
so in case of an
it's like a
invasion,
wall.
it is. You go inside of here, and those are like arrow windows. The guys would stay there commanding everything. This is like a little castle. So in 1755, this tower, the bell tower, actually collapsed, and a little bit of the other. And since 500 years have passed since the original construction and the earthquake and the reconstruction, they couldn't find the exact same stone. And I apologize in advance, but the roads here are very ancient and made for the tram.
oh, it's okay.
It is from the Order of Malta. Yeah, yes, one. And what you are going to see over here is that you are going to go up there where the pergola is, and what you're going to see is the river basin of the Tagus River.
Okay.
So all that you're going to see here is the river, and what you're going to see over there is the neighborhood of Alfama from the top. And that's actually the oldest neighborhood in the city. It's from the 3rd century.
Oh, it's right there. So that's where it is.
So you have St. Vincent over here, and on the back you have St. Vincent's Church and Monastery that we're going to go afterwards.
Oh, okay.
But this one is important for you guys to see. On his hand you have the boat with the 2 crows, and that is actually the symbol of Lisbon.
Oh.
And when the city was conquered in 1147, our first king, Dom Afonso Henriques, decided to retrieve the body of St. Vincent that was lost during the Crusades in the southern part of Portugal, in the Algarve. And he went there, and when he got there, he retrieved the body from a beach, and alongside with the body came a family of 2 crows together with the coffin. And the legend says that when the family of crows arrived here, they stayed in the cathedral that we were, and supposedly all the crows of Lisbon are descended from those 2. That's a myth, right? But it's a beautiful story. I'm going to show you here an interesting structure. Over here, you see that little house over there? On the corner? That is actually the oldest private house here in Lisbon. So that little house over there is more than 500 years old.
We're going on top of the world.
Well, at least Lisbon.
On top of Lisbon.
Our Lady of the Hill. But in Portuguese, it's Nossa Senhora do Monte.
Our Lady of the Hill. Wow.
This is a cool one, right?
Yeah.
So basically we started our tour. You see the bridge? So it was continuing that way over there. So we came all the way down over there. You remember when I told you about downtown that was at sea level? It's that part over there that makes like a little valley. Then you have the castle of St. George Castle over there, and the Santa Lucia viewpoint that we were before, it's on the other side of that hill.
Oh, cool.
And everything you see here is Lisbon.
remember when we were in Santa Lucia?
Yes.
You saw, after Santa Lucia, we passed by St. Vincent's statue, and on the back you had the St. Vincent's Church and Monastery. This is it. So the fun story about this one is that in around the 1600s, the Spaniards actually ruled Lisbon in Portugal, and when they arrived in Lisbon, they found out that the patron saint of Lisbon was St. Vincent, and actually St. Vincent was born in Spain. So they were all very patriotic at the time, and they were like, how come Lisbon don't have like a dedicated church solely to St. Vincent? We're going to build one, and we're not going to build just one. We're going to build the biggest church in Lisbon for St. Vincent. But there was a catch, there was a problem. You can imagine that there was a big wall over here, and everything inside the city was inside, the city was inside those walls. And when they wanted to build this, everything that was important, you wanted to build inside the city walls for the defensive purposes, right? But there was not enough room. And the Spanish were like, okay, now we're gonna build one anyways. We're gonna build it outside the city walls, and that's hence the name, the Church of St. Vincent of the outside, São Vicente de Fora. Basically for that. So they chanced, they gambled, and okay, we're gonna build one outside the city wall, and they built the church and the monastery. The church is really, really beautiful. It's Monday, so it's closed, and I'm gonna show you guys what the ingenious solution that they came up to surpass the need of defensive. You see that? So you can imagine the wall over here. Yeah, the wall. You still have a bit. You see the archway that they built over there? Yeah. So they built an archway that made the communication between the inside of the church and the inside of the city wall. So you have a double decker.
It's a really big church.
It is a huge church. It's the biggest church in Lisbon. It's bigger than the cathedral. And this is actually one of the last remains of the original wall. The church goes on. Goes on, goes on, goes on.
Yeah, this is so huge.
It's huge, the church. Yeah.
It is. Look at that.
This is what we're going to see now.
Oh, that one is nice.
This one is a really beautiful one. And what happens here is this is actually called the National Pantheon. And what happens here is that inside it's like it's the resting place for a lot of dignitaries from Lisbon and Portugal. But it's not like the royal family Pantheon. So the Pantheon of the royal family, the last one, is in the monastery, the first one that we saw in Belem. And in here you have people from the arts, like so you have musicians, poets, writers, painters. You have some people attached to politics. You have some ex-former presidents of Portugal. But what happens is you go inside and you have a bunch of descriptions telling you the history of those people and their deeds and everything. So the traditional and core neighborhood that survived from the earthquake. And this is how the streets were before the reconstruction of Lisbon.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's like esquinitas.
This was a classical Lisbon street before 1755. And you can imagine being on a street like that in an earthquake event. The main importance for this neighborhood, the reason for it to be so old and always occupied, is because this was the only hill that had natural spring waters. So if you were in the medieval times, you didn't have pipes, right? You didn't have none. For the maritime discoveries, this was actually the arrivals terminal. So all the ships that came from the New World, from Brazil, from the coast of Africa, from Japan and everything, departed from Belem, but this was the place where they arrived, and all the goods were divided here, and then they were like traded on these streets that are over here on the right side. This is actually the Ministry of Navy, and just the sheer size of it tells you about the size that the Portuguese Armada used to have. Like, we divided the world between us and the Spanish. So we both had like the biggest armadas in the world.
So Portugal was a colony of Spain?
No, for a time, like before Portugal was a country, we were part of Spain. Then we separated.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a little street over here that we're going to like if you pass here again. It's called the Pink Street.
Oh yeah, there's a pink road.
Yeah, they painted the road pink, and you have a lot of restaurants, bars.
Like, yeah, the one that we you have a small fire truck.
Yeah,
this is a fire truck.
Yeah, this is a fire truck, and this is a fire department here.
Yeah. I know, they're so cute.
Yeah. It's actually, this is called Carmo Convent. and this is the only building that was not reconstruction after the earthquake. So the church decided to, you can imagine that the worst place for you to be in a case of a severe earthquake was a church, right? High ceilings, not a lot of support, so all the roof collapsed, all the ceiling collapsed.
Oh,
And in this one,
inside.
obviously, yeah, so inside, this is like an open air church. So you go there, you still have the archways and everything, but you don't have the roof.
So the roof was
Oh yeah, you can see it
collapsed.
right there.
Yeah, and they left it as it is to remind the people of the power of nature. Well, the nature was God, right? So to remind people of that.
Tayo kanina. Remember we were there?
Yeah, on the other
We
side.
were just right there.
Ito yung harapan.
Ito yung... Yeah.
Pero mas maganda yung view sa kabila, ano?
We were just right there.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Ganda, no?
It was Queen Amelia, and that is a school with her name. And she was actually the daughter of the queen that made this church. And this church actually has a very sad story around it, because when it was built, before it was built, our queen, Queen Mary, was having trouble getting pregnant. So she made a promise to God that if God gave her a male son, an heir, she would build an amazing church. And actually, shortly after that, she got pregnant of a little boy. And more kids actually. So she built the church, but then, like many children of that period, they died.
Yeah.
They died with smallpox, and so the rest of her siblings. So she got. No one knew what a depression was at a time. So imagine losing like 7 kids, and she got crazy with the depression, and she was actually nicknamed the Crazy Queen. Which I think that is really sad, because that was only you had like the aristocracy, like the people, the important people, and this was the courthouse. So those guys used to come here to discuss matters of the state. The Marquês de Pombal is like the Pombal Marquis, and what he did, he was a kind of a prime minister of the king, like he was the doer, like the king. This was, yeah. So, and this guy was the guy that was responsible in 1755 for the reconstruction of the city.
This was the brain.
Yeah, he was the mastermind behind all this reconstruction. So he placed himself right here with more highlight than the king himself. So the king's statue is at Commerce Square that we were on the bottom, and he's here. And just look at what he did. Normally when you have a statue, someone made it for you, right? Like an homage. No, he made his statue of himself with a king on his side. Like he obviously thought himself.
So the king is the lion?
Well, no, he considered himself to be higher than the king.
Oh.
Yeah, so you have this lady over here is the lady that represents the republic, like the democracy, and then you have the workers that are the backbone of everything, and him on top. Like I'm the mastermind over here. Prime Avenue here in the city. So you have the most expensive square meter in real estate terms. So this is expensive to live here or to have a shop or something. So this is where you have Pantheon, this is where you have Bulgari.
Versace.
Yeah.
sunod ulit.